Hello, dragonflies! Welcome to the Gilmore Gals podcast, where we take a deep dive into each episode of the beloved show.
We're your hosts, Sarah
and Ani.
We're huge Gilmore Girls fans, and we're besties. In this podcast, we talk about everything Gilmore, from the pop culture references to the tiniest minutia only a true Gilmore nerd would care about.
Capper boom! Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Ani.
Happy New Year. This is so exciting. I'm so happy to be doing this episode because I feel like they're starting to kind of get into their rhythm.
Yeah.
Like it feels more like Gilmore Girls. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Everybody's feeling a little bit more comfortable. They're understanding who their characters are a little bit more. Yeah.
I was re-listening to one of our episodes the other day. I noticed that I said, "Oh, I actually like this one." About one of the episodes, and I'm like, well, that doesn't sound right. I love this show. It's just season one is, it's a rough around the edges, I would say.
Yeah, I feel like that happens with a lot of shows,
especially older shows that had like 20 something episodes a season,
Yeah.
Whereas nowadays it's like, okay, you get 10 episodes, make it count.
Mm-hmm.
So today we're doing season 1, episode 10, Forgiveness and Stuff. It's written by Amy Sherman Palladino and John Stevens and was directed by Bethany Rooney.
This episode aired on December 21st, 2000. 4 days after the events of the last episode, Lorelai and Rory still aren't really speaking. Emily uninvites Lorelai to her annual Christmas party, and Richard has a medical emergency. In all the upheaval, Lorelai's relationship with Luke takes an interesting turn.
Ooh la la. All right, let's start with some fast facts. I think we have a couple today. So first of all, in the scene where Rory is bugging Lorelai to swallow her pride and just attend Emily's Christmas dinner, even though she was technically uninvited, Lorelai is stubbornly holding a grudge, and she says it burns more calories that way, And when Rory says, that's not true, Lorelai replies, yes, it is. How do you think your grandma got those legs of hers? So that made me think, it reminded me that I had heard at one point that Kelly Bishop was known as a really great dancer. So it led me into a deep dive on the incomparable Kelly Bishop, who plays Emily Gilmore. And she was born actually Carol Bishop in 1944. And she's currently 79 years young, if you can believe it. I had a vague memory of hearing that she got her start as a ballet dancer, which would explain her fabulous legs, first of all, and also why she made the perfect ballet instructor in that short-lived fan favorite Bunheads. Do you remember that show?
I do. Yeah, I really like that show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what is her name? Foster something?
Sutton Foster.
Sutton Foster. She was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So actually they worked together, she and Sutton Foster, in a 2011 revival of Anything Goes. So,
yeah. I saw her win her Tony for that.
Oh,
Sutton
nice.
Foster, yeah.
Well, Kelly Bishop actually originated the role of Sheila in A Chorus Line, and she won a Tony for Best Performance in a Musical for that one. So she's kind of a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she performed at Radio City Music Hall before she was even 20 years old. She went on to Vegas and to do some television, and she got her first Broadway role at the age of 23.
Wow, that's very fascinating. Yeah, thank you for doing that.
Yeah, sure thing.
Very cool. Did she guest star on Mrs. Maisel?
Yes, she was in there somewhere. I just don't remember where.
So I thought so, like in the last season, I think, right?
I think so. I have to go back and check, but she's wonderful in everything.
She is. Okay, so we also have 2 notable guest stars in this episode that we wanted to discuss. First off is Richard's co-worker at the Christmas party, and he was played by Richard Fancy, a character actor who has been active since the early 1980s. He was in pretty much every show in the 80s and 90s, including Empty Nest, The Wonder Years, Friends, and Seinfeld, where he played Lipman. I have not seen that show, so I don't know who that is, but...
That was Elaine's boss, one of her bosses.
Okay. And then secondly, we have the amazing Jane Lynch as the nurse. She is probably most well known for playing the delightfully evil Sue Sylvester on Glee, but she has also been in tons of television and movies, including recurring roles on Criminal Minds and The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And she's also hosted NBC game shows, Hollywood Game Night, which is one of my absolute favorite game shows, and the reboot of The Weakest Link. And in addition to all this, she's also a talented performer and actually tours occasionally with Kate Flannery, who played Meredith in The Office.
They tour doing what?
Like singing, I think maybe slightly vaudeville.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Her role in The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel
Hmm.
was probably one of the most interesting television roles I've ever seen.
Yeah.
She was amazing in
Yeah.
that. I don't know if y'all know this show, but it's definitely worth a watch. It's on Amazon.
If you like Gilmore Girls, you're gonna love Mrs. Maisel if you haven't seen it.
Well, thank you for that. That's wonderful.
You're welcome.
How about we get into our recap?
All right, sounds great. So this episode opens with preparations for the annual Stars Hollow Christmas pageant.
Lorelai, as usual, has volunteered to be the seamstress for the town's production, and Rory is helping find the missing arm of the non-binary baby Jesus doll.
And we learn that they've used this exact same doll since 1965, and from the creepy doll face, it shows.
It's all like
All I
worn
could
down.
think of was, can you imagine how many like germs and like stuff is on that thing? By their sad expressions when Lorelai and Rory exchange looks, it's clear that the two of them haven't really reconciled yet since the debacle at the end of the last episode. Now, my brothers and I were definitely a part of Christmas plays like this back in the day when at church. How about you, Ani? Have you ever been in any Christmas programs?
Well, we weren't churchy people, but I was involved in various children's choirs, and we always put on, various performances. We did something festive for the holiday seasons, and usually it involved learning a bunch of different songs from, like, holiday songs from all over the world, which was always
Yeah.
really cool to me because I was always interested in languages. So that was
Yeah.
fun.
That's cool. Yeah, we kind of did similar in my choir too. We learned a song about the Torah, I think.
Yeah.
And then we also learned Silent Night in German and sign language. So,
Really? Do you
yeah,
remember the sign language?
I remember some of it. So I'll see if I can remember it for you.
That's so cool.
In the next scene, it's the next day, and we find Rory and Lane catching up in the town gazebo.
We learn that it's been 4 days since the incident at Miss Patty's, and that Lorelai and Emily still aren't speaking, and that Dean's new nickname at the Gilmore household is Narcolepsy Boy. Not only that, but Rory and Dean also haven't spoken since the incident.
I would die. Like the anxiety in me would not be able to handle that. Like ending on like a very tense thing like that and then to go days without talking to the person.
But we do find out that he's at least been trying to get in touch with her, so that
Yeah.
would help probably with that.
Yeah, that's true. Well, Rory and Lane are discussing Christmas presents, and Lane says that you have to consider what the gift means to the recipient. For example, she once got her mom some perfume as a gift, which to Lane meant,
Hey, Mom, you work hard. You deserve something fancy.
but to Mrs. Kim, it meant,
Hey, Mom, here's some smelly sex juice, the kind I use to lure boys with. That is my favorite quote of the episode.
love it. And I would just like to back up for a second.
Mhm.
So Rory tells Lane that she bought Dean a book, and not just any book. The Metamorphosis, a novella written by Franz Kafka in 1915. If you don't know anything about it, like I didn't, before doing research for it, it's about a man who wakes up one morning to find that he has been turned into an insect, though the type is never fully disclosed. And it's a 70-page novella that has led to many different interpretations among literary scholars. What was Rory thinking? Just from the title alone, it seems a little more sophisticated than our dear, sweet, dumb Dean.
Absolutely. So we had to read this in high school in language arts. It's generally accepted that the bug that the guy turns into is a giant cockroach. So lovely, like the kind we get here in Hawaii. They're gigantic. But the story is actually really bizarre and really surreal and way too symbolic for someone like Dean to understand. We've covered he's not bright.
Right.
And I think she's crazy. I think she's crazy for even thinking of this book and for thinking that Dean would understand it, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can just imagine his face when he opens it, like, oh.
A book.
Well, next we're at the Independence Inn, where Michelle is very Frenchly, and yes, I know that's not an actual word, micromanaging the maintenance man who has put up the lobby's Christmas tree. I love Michelle, the way he's just like, he's like, no, the angel over there, no, over there.
He's so
Such a jerk.
French. I'm pretty sure like Michelle just happens to be snooty. I don't think it's
Yeah,
because he's French. I feel like he would have been snooty no matter where he was born.
probably. Yeah, he's just that kind of personality.
Exactly.
Anyway, Lorelai gets a call from Emily inviting her and Rory to their Christmas dinner.
So Lorelai informs Emily that they won't be able to make it for cocktails at 6 because, in a shocking twist, some people work for a living and don't get to set their own schedules.
And Emily immediately gets offended that Lorelai can't just bail on work whenever she feels like it and says, "This is obviously an enormous burden for you. So just don't come at all. Just send Rory."
And this is immediately after Emily just said to Lorelai, "The world does not always revolve around you." She is so entitled.
Lorelai is shocked that she's getting out of Christmas dinner because in the past she's been on the verge of death basically and still had to attend the Christmas dinner.
But even though she's glad to be getting out of it, you can still tell that she's hurt by the uninvite.
Yeah, I mean, Christmas dinner. I mean, this is a huge deal at the Gilmore house. Next, at Lorelai's house, we find Rory trying to convince Lorelai to swallow her pride and go to the party, even if she was uninvited, and she's unsuccessful.
Now, here's a little background catch. This is the second time I've noticed this in the Gilmore house. There's a giant pile of red apples on the coffee table in their living room. Are they real? I can't tell. They're kind of shiny. Maybe they're made of wax. I don't know. But I think they have to be just plain decoration because, as we all know, the Gilmore Girls do not eat fruit.
That's a really great catch. And I think we may have seen the same basket of apples on the kitchen table a few episodes back.
That's what I'm thinking, except I think it's not the same one. I think they just happen to have a lot of red apples around, which doesn't make any sense for the characters.
I don't know. Interesting. Rory arrives at the party and she tries to apologize to Emily for the incident that happened with Dean the night of the dance.
Emily, of course, dismisses it and says, "This is neither the time nor the place." You can tell the poor kid is just crestfallen and upset.
And Emily tells Richard that Lorelai couldn't make it tonight because she had to work. And Rory kind of whips her head around to look at her, knowing that that's a lie. And keep this white lie in the back of your mind.
Back at Lorelai's, she's on the phone trying and failing to get a pizza delivered. So I guess there's like, I don't know, was it weather? What was it that kept the
I
pizza?
think so, yeah.
Or the truck was broken?
Yeah, or both, I think.
Yeah. So she walks
truck
over.
broke down because of the weather. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. So she walks over to the fridge and she pulls out, wait for it, a bag of lettuce and some salad dressing. What the what?
And did you notice that there's apples on the kitchen table?
I did not notice those apples.
So they must eat some healthy food.
I guess in season 1, because you know that doesn't happen later.
Well, suddenly we hear some tapping, and Lorelai finds Dean standing outside Rory's bedroom window. And I love Dean's face when he sees Lorelai. He's just like, "Oh, crap." But she opens the window and he tries to apologize for the incident, reiterating that nothing happened.
He says they were just reading a book and they fell asleep, to which Lorelai responds, "Pick a more interesting book next time."
And then Dean asks Lorelai if she hates him and begs her to tell him where he stands. Lorelai responds that she doesn't hate him, but she did come up with 20 different ways to remove his head from his body. Which one was the best? Hedge clippers. Dull ones.
That's a nice visual.
Yeah.
So I want to point out as an aside, this is just something that always bugs me in movies and TV shows. Windows never have screens on them. Have you noticed?
Yes.
The people just climb in and out all willy-nilly. Can you imagine the amount of bugs you would have? I would die.
Yeah, it's so weird.
But I mean, like, you lived in the Midwest. You guys have screens on your windows.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's happening here? What is this?
It's honestly, it's probably, because of the cameras, the screen would probably disrupt the shot. So that would be my guess as to why they never have screens.
Oh, that makes sense. Well, I was just thinking story-wise, like, for example, of course, Dawson's Creek with Joey coming in and out that window, and just stuff like that. Remember Clarissa Explains It All? What's with all the window climbing? What is that?
I don't know. My brother actually, so in our old house, we had a like an enclosed porch, and then one of the bedrooms had windows looking out over the roof of the enclosed porch. And so you could, in theory, open the window and the screen window and get out onto the roof. And one year, because we had like a bunch of snow drifts, and my youngest brother asked my mom if he could jump off the roof onto into the snow,
Oh my God.
into the snow drifts. My mom was like, "No, but thanks for asking."
Good idea, but no.
Yeah. Well, next, Lorelai heads over to Luke's and we're treated to a beautiful bell choir practicing in the town square. Though I have to say they're not super good because this
Oh.
just the one guy who's obviously not in time.
Have you ever seen one of these? They're amazing.
I used to be in one.
Shut up.
Hmm. Yeah.
What?
When I was a kid at our old church, they actually had like a children's bell choir, and I was in it, and I really loved it. It was so cool. We had to wear like these white gloves, and to like handle the bells, and yeah, it was awesome. I really
You're my
liked
hero. That's amazing.
it.
So cool. I love it.
Well, we find out from the conversation that Luke is rooting for Lorelai to forbid Rory from seeing the bag boy, aka Dean, anymore.
It drives me nuts. This is one of those nerd things, so you can fast forward if you're not a grammar, whatever nerd. It drives me nuts when people use the present tense of a word when we know that there's a clear past tense version of it. For example, Luke says, "Tell me you forbid her to see the bag boy." What is the past tense of forbid, Sarah?
Forbade.
Forbade. Forbade. There's a word. The Brits say forbade, but it's not forbid. And it's the same with the word spit. Have you noticed people say things like, he spit in that guy's face? No, he
Mhm.
didn't. He spat in the guy's face. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I do.
I'm the only person annoyed by this, I think,
Yes,
in the
I
world.
think so.
But
Mhm.
I'm just, come on, people. And you figure writers, people who are writing for a show, would know better,
Mhm.
right?
They were writing for Luke, and so
Yeah.
maybe Luke's grammar wouldn't be 100%.
Ugh. I suppose, I suppose that's accurate, but still, I don't like it. So this reminds me of remember in My Fair Lady when Professor Higgins says there are even places where English completely disappears. In America, they haven't used it for years. That's what I think. That concludes my rant. I'm done.
I love it. Well, back to Luke and Lorelai. He is still going on about how Dean is trouble, and he's known that was trouble from the first time he looked at him. And this is a runner throughout the series as long as Dean is around. Luke does not like Dean and never believes he's good enough for Rory. And I love how protective of Rory Luke is from the very beginning of the series.
Mhm.
It's so sweet, like he
So
just
sweet. He's like a real dad to her.
yeah.
And he's right. Dean is a loser. He's always
Yes.
been a loser. He will always be a loser.
But then it got interesting with Lorelai actually beginning to defend Dean to Luke.
I wonder what that was about.
I don't know. Maybe one of those like I can be mad and like I can be mean, but you can't, maybe. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Lorelai asks to see a menu, which is weird because she orders the same thing every day and she goes to Luke's like every day. But
Mhm.
today she's in the mood for something a little different.
And she explains that she's looking for some kind of holiday special, something festive, because her parents are having their big Christmas celebration. The one holiday she actually enjoys spending at their house.
Mm.
And this year she's been uninvited.
So she ends up ordering a burger, which we'll see in a few scenes. Luke does something special with it because he's amazing and he hearts her.
Back at the Christmas party, we see everyone sitting around the table enjoying their dinner. Everyone but Richard, who is looking uncomfortable and remarks that it feels unbearably hot.
He keeps trying to loosen his tie at the table, but Emily won't let him because it doesn't look right, kind of rude.
Mhm.
So finally, Richard he gets up to go adjust the thermostat because he's so hot, but he's gone for so long that Emily goes after him.
During dinner, someone asks where Lorelai is, and Emily responds that she's sick and couldn't come. Ooh, she's not keeping her story straight. And one of the guests noticed it and actually called her on it. And she's like, "Oh, I thought she had to work." And then
Uh-huh.
what does Emily say? Something like, "Well, she had to work and then she got sick," or something like
Yeah. So
that.
either way, she couldn't make
Yeah.
it.
And then meanwhile, Luke is bringing Lorelai her hamburger that he has designed open-faced to look like Santa Claus with the big beard and Santa cap. It's adorable.
It's adorable. And he used olives for the eyes and what looks like maybe a cherry tomato for the nose and the mouth.
And the whole thing looks like there's about a pound of cream cheese and ketchup with a little bit of meat there in the middle. Well, I'm just like cream cheese. Like, wouldn't I feel like you would use mayo?
Exactly. I thought that was a little weird when he
Yeah.
said cream cheese. Well,
Mhm.
Lorelai looks at it and she's, kind of admiringly like, "What did you do?" And Luke tries to play it off like it's no big deal. And he says, "Well, you wanted something festive."
But then he kind of gets that little like side smirk,
Yeah.
like he's pleased that she's pleased.
Yeah. Do you
Mm.
remember in the last scene of the last well, it's not the last scene, but in the last episode of the series when he goes, "I just like to see you happy."
Yeah. So sweet. So you can tell that Lorelai is very touched by the gesture and tells him, "No one has ever made me something quite this disgusting before. I thank you."
Oh. So right then she gets a call in her cell and she finds out that her dad collapsed and he's on his way to the hospital and she's clearly really distraught and she's not thinking and it's Luke to the rescue.
Because rather than letting Lorelai take a cab, which is her plan in the first place, Luke kicks everyone out of the diner, tells them their food is on him, and he offers to drive Lorelai himself. And I will say that is one nice thing about small towns is that people really do tend to look out for each other.
Yeah, and that's not the only time he does that in the series where he just goes like, "You guys lock up, I gotta go." That's kind of
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
On the drive to the hospital, Lorelai says, "I feel like this is one of those moments where I should be remembering all the great times I had with my dad, but she can't think of any because there weren't any."
She says he went to work, he came home, he read the paper, he went to bed. I snuck out the window, probably because it didn't have a screen.
Exactly.
Then she goes through a list of things that Richard did by the book because they were the things that he was supposed to do to be a good husband and provide for his family. And Annie, is it in A Year in the Life when she tells the skipping school story, or is that later this in this series?
It is in A Year in the Life. That's when she has the big sort of breakdown, but also
Yeah.
breakthrough. Yeah, it's very beautiful. It makes me cry every single time I watch it.
Mm.
Oh, it's so powerful, especially because she's on the phone with Emily at the time. And
Yeah.
yeah, the next part here always breaks my heart. So I thought that we should just read it in full. And what she says is, all he asked in return was for his daughter to wear white dresses and go to cotillion and want the same life he had. What a disappointment it must have been for him to get me. And I love how she says it because it's not like a woe is me, like feel bad for me kind
Mhm.
of moment. It's just kind of like a realization like, oh my God, like he's gonna die, she's thinking, and
Mhm.
I was never what he wanted in a child. So it's just really touching, I think.
Yeah. And then Luke says the most beautiful thing in response. He says, "I can't imagine anyone seeing you as a disappointment."
Luke.
Now, to lighten things up a little bit here, I would like to add something to this exchange.
Yes.
So, at the beginning of the car ride, Lorelai is remarking about how slow Luke is driving.
Uh-huh.
And he says it's because the roads are bad. And I understand Lorelai's need to get to the hospital as soon as possible. But I have also driven on roads like that, and you absolutely need to go slow if you don't want to end up in a ditch or worse. And especially in a pickup truck like his, if it's not weighted down in the back, you stand a greater chance of losing control and spinning out. That is all. And now my
Wow.
rant is over.
Okay.
He's being responsible and
I
safe.
know. And she's being so ungrateful too, in that moment. It's just kind of hard to watch because he's just being so patient.
She does apologize to him,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Oh
like,
my gosh, I don't know. The driving when we lived in Arkansas and it was snowy, just it was so terrifying for me having grown
mhm,
up in Southern California, never dealing with that kind of terrain and then just like noticing the car slip a little bit or oh my God,
mhm,
it's so scary.
yeah.
Well, in the next scene, we see Emily being Emily at the
Mhm.
hospital. She is super rude and demanding and entitled, and she's ordering the nurse around like she's the Queen of Sheba, and the nurse is just her hired help.
And the nurse is played by none other than the one and only Jane Lynch, and she's acting like any nurse probably would in that situation. She is not taking crap. She's
Hmm.
not having any of it. Nurses and teachers, I think,
Uh-huh.
are the most overworked and underappreciated people on the planet.
Here, here. Rory offers to call Lorelai again because Lorelai's not there yet, and Emily dismisses the idea, saying, "I'm sure she's very busy." And then she sends Rory off on a few errands, and she herself, Emily, places a call to Lorelai's house. And of course, no one's there.
And then Lorelai finally arrives, and Emily is genuinely shocked to see her. And since she's with Luke, Emily inquires whether they were on a date. After all, it is Friday night and she arrived with an escort.
Lorelai's dismissive reply basically indicates, no, of course not. This is just Luke. Ouch. You can
Ooh.
tell. You can tell Luke is a bit hurt just by the expression on his face. So Richard is brought out from the ER and he's taken to a proper room. And it's very clear that Lorelai does not want to go in the room with Richard for probably many reasons. And we see Rory reading the financial section of the newspaper to Richard.
And Emily then comes in with some new pillows and makes it clear that she needs time with just Richard. So Rory goes to leave, and she and Richard have the sweetest exchange. And it's my favorite line in this episode. And Rory says, "If I hug you, is it going to hurt?" And Richard bravely replies, "Pain is a part of life."
Oh,
It's just so sweet. And then Rory leaves, and Richard keeps trying to talk to Emily about his will and other practical concerns as Emily is bustling about, trying not to think about the severity of the situation.
and here Emily gets uncharacteristically emotional. She's not really one to cry. And here she says, I did not sign on to your dying, and it is not going to happen. Not tonight, not for a very long time. In fact, I demand to go first. Do I make myself clear?
And Richard very gently replies, "Yes, Emily, you may go first."
Oh,
But of course, we know that doesn't happen.
indeed.
Spoiler.
Spoiler alert. Oh, so sad.
Mm-hmm.
So Lorelai and Rory, they meet up by the vending machine. And if you recall, these two still haven't had like a proper apology, situation. They haven't made up yet. So Lorelai tells her that Narcolepsy Boy came by the house that evening and that he had reiterated to her that nothing had happened between him and Rory the night of the dance.
And then Lorelai tells Rory, "There are only two things that I totally trust in this entire world. The fact that I will never be able to understand what Charo is saying, no matter how long she lives in this country, and you."
Do you remember Charo?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Oh my
yeah.
God. She's adorable.
I just saw her in something recently. I don't remember what it was,
She's gotta
though.
be like 80, right?
Something like that. But she looks pretty good.
I'm sure she does.
So next, Emily is sitting with Luke outside of Richard's room, and the two of them have a nice chat. She says she is not sure what Lorelai has told him about her father, but he is a very good man who always did right by his family.
And Luke immediately says, that's what she told me, which comes as a bit of a pleasant surprise to Emily because she's spent all these years believing that Lorelai hates both of her parents.
Then Emily asks what's going on between Luke and Lorelai, and he says nothing. They're just friends.
She replies, you're idiots, the both of you, because everyone can tell that they're lobsters and they belong together.
Absolutely. For once, I actually agree with Emily on something.
I know, right?
Well, now Lorelai has finally run out of excuses to avoid seeing her father, and so she finally enters his room and finds him sleeping, and she's just kind of looking at him sadly for a minute.
He opens his eyes and he finds her with that expression on her face, and the two of them just kind of exchange this heartbreaking look that, to my mind, says something like, you're here? And her replying, of course I'm here. That's what I read. What did you read?
I felt like there was so much said in that look, like what you said, like the, oh, you're here. And, I just feel like there was a lot of regrets in that look too. Yeah.
It was lovely. Just so well acted.
Mm-hmm. Well, Lorelai leaves the room as others bustle in, and she finds Luke standing there. And he is, of course, the perfect shoulder to cry on.
And he holds her for a little bit and says, here's where the guy's supposed to give the girl his handkerchief, but I don't have one. And plus, I find the practice a little revolting. And I wholeheartedly concur.
Yes, yes. God, my grandpa used to have a handkerchief, and I always thought it was so gross.
Yes. And his was monogrammed and everything. And I was like, why?
Well, we find out that Luke went in search of coffee for Lorelai swoon because the vending machines aren't working, and he successfully found some for her in the nurse's lounge.
Luke takes Rory home, and Emily steps out of Richard's room and sits next to Lorelai. And when asked why she didn't go home too, Lorelai says she wanted to stay for a while in case anyone needed anything. And you kind of see the wall between the two of them start to come down when Emily, with a slight smile, asks Lorelai if she'd like to go to the cafeteria with her.
And then in the next scene, Lorelai enters Luke's diner, and we see that she has brought him a Christmas gift, a blue baseball hat to replace his old one.
Luke puts it on and, spoiler alert, he wears it exclusively until their breakup at the start of season 7.
You can tell that he's really touched by the hat. And my question is, why was the bag so giant for just the hat?
I didn't notice the bag. Oh my God. Okay, pop quiz. What is his team?
He has a team?
He has a team.
I don't know.
It's the Boston Red Sox.
Oh, okay.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
I don't think he's from Boston, but there you go.
And that was Forgiveness and Stuff. Join us next time as we discuss Season 1, Episode 11, Paris is Burning.
Copper boom.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review and share with your friends.
If you have any questions or comments, if you feel like we left anything out or got anything wrong, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at the Gilmore Gals Pod. And we also have a Facebook page.
Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes.
Copper boom!